John Colo with growingyourgreens.com to do another exciting episode for you. In this episode, I'm still in Pahrump, Nevada at the home of the Green Life Produce organic farm here, and I'm at the Soil Life Summit 2024. And in this episode, I'm going to interview one of the many experts here that actually had classes here because you weren't able to hear them. So anyways, let's go over to a nice area of the farm and we're going to hit up an interview where you guys are going to learn lots of good information. Also, be sure to check my link down below for my overview of the Soil Life Summit 2024, where you get to see some of the best vendors and what's going on here in Pahrump, Nevada. So now I have the pleasure of interviewing Casey and Keisha from Catalyst Bioamendments, and that's the compost that you guys saw in the last episode or a couple episodes ago where I showed you guys the best compost that I've ever seen, which is a lot more than just a compost. So first off, you guys want to tell us about why you started a compost company to make, I'd say the best compost that I've ever experienced in my life.
We had to.
You had to?
We had to.
Why?
Well, okay, so we learned from Dr. Elaine Ingham how to use our microscopes and how to make compost and how to identify microorganisms. And then we started looking at all the compost on the market and trying to find the fungi, bacteria, protozoa, and nematodes that we wanted, and we didn't see it. And so we had to make it so we could do our jobs.
Yeah, I'd say we really set out, when we started this entire journey, we set out to be consultants. Like, we wanted to go on farm, look at somebody's farm and be like, okay, you need to do this, you need to change this. We wanted to help them kind of integrate biology into their growing systems. And yeah, we set out and we started looking, and we were using our microscope, and we couldn't find compost that we wanted to use in this process. There was nothing out there that had all those trophic levels of microorganisms in them. And so we were like, God, so in order to do our job, we're gonna have to create this compost. And then we kind of just became accidental compost company just by proxy.
I want to step back a second, because people think I could just go to Home Depot and buy compost. But then when I grow in that compost, my plants are yellow and they die. What's really the difference between all the compost that you checked that didn't have all the soil microbiology in the microscope and what you're doing now? And what difference can people see by actually using good quality compost?
So with our compost, the number one thing with our compost is input materials. Like, if you want to have good compost, you have to start with good input materials and diverse input materials. So we spend most of our time actually hunting down, seeking out, trying to find materials that we can use in our compost that aren't going to be full of contaminants. Yard clippings and things like that from downtown anywhere are going to be covered in glyphosate, they're going to be covered in fungicides, they're going to be laden with tons of inorganic fertilizers, and those kind of things inhibit growth of microorganisms. So that's really the first thing that we do when we go out and try to produce the product that we make.
But what are we going to see actually when you use the compost?
Right.
So the reality is that plants and microbes, they've been working together for years and years and years. Since the beginning of time, microorganisms create soil, they work with plants, right? So what you're gonna see when you're working with a type of compost like ours, where you're having all the different bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, I'm gonna keep saying it, is nutrient cycling. You're gonna start to see roots that are growing much more healthy and much bigger. You're gonna be able to have nutrients made in the moment by the microorganisms right there in the rhizosphere or the root zone of the plant. You're going to see often the color will change. It'll be a little bit deeper in color. You're going to see leaves growing more frequently, bigger fruits, tastier. That's my favorite part. When you work with the microbes and you work with the soil, you actually get all the benefits that you really want to see, right?
It's kind of like the full genetic expression of that plant.
So, here's the thing, and the cool thing about these guys, or guys and girls, sorry, is that you don't need to buy their stuff necessarily. They don't necessarily want to buy they wouldn't want you to buy their stuff. Well, maybe they do, but but they're going to teach you how to make your own good compost that you don't have to buy their stuff, which is the goal of everybody out there. And unfortunately, most people are not teaching you guys how to grow and cultivate the best compost, because everybody does it wrong, or most people does it wrong. Not everybody, but most people, because in industry, they're just turning organic waste materials into something they could sell. and they're not judged upon if that stuff that they're selling will actually grow stuff or grow stuff healthily or create a good soil rhizosphere for your plant's roots. They can give a shit less because they've turned those waste products into cash already.
Yes.
And then they're just gone. They're just, okay, I got your money, ha. You're screwed. So in this episode, what we're gonna do is we're gonna teach you guys, right? I mean, they gave you. We cannot say that you did not come to this event, and they had like at least 4 hours of workshops, one of which I attended today, a part of it, and they taught people how to make the best compost. And we can't do that in a single YouTube video. Maybe I'll visit them one day and we could go more in depth. But we're gonna give you guys the basics of how you can make world-class compost that's actually going to feed your plants, cause the leaves to grow greener, make them have more delicious fruits and veggies, have higher terpenoids or cannabinoids or whatever you guys are looking for in your stuff. So I guess without further ado, let's get into this episode. And it's not even hard. There's only 4 things you guys need to do to make sure you guys have world-class compost. It's actually going to feed your plants instead of hurt them.
What are those 4 things?
What was number 1?
Ingredients. Ingredients. Water, maintenance, and testing.
That's it? Only 4 things? Why don't other companies do this?
Well, I mean, it sounds super simple when you put it in a list, but honestly, like I said earlier, it's like finding ingredients can be one of the most difficult things. Watering, we are obsessive waterers. Our friend, we have an employee who works 40 hours a week all year long, and his job is to water. That's the only thing he does.
That's not the only thing.
It's not the only thing he does, but pretty
seems
close.
Unfair. He does other things. He taught a class today.
And that watering, that's also part of that maintenance. It's checking in on the compost, making sure everything's okay. This is a pet. You need to make sure that you're taking care of it. And then testing. Testing is also, it can be laborious. It can be tedious, but it's something that you have to do. But you want to jump into number 1 with ingredients.
Ingredients? Okay, so the most important thing is to get diversity. So if you can think about woody materials are 60% of your pile. It's the majority of the biomass. So over the year, you can collect all the different species of wood chips that you can get. Woody materials from your garden or from Chip Drop is a really good place to get free wood chips. And just let them age. Let them hang out in the rain and sit out in the weather and collect fungal spores. And then when you use them in your compost, they're going to be an inoculum already. You can also save your green materials. When you cut them out of your garden, you can dry them in the shade and save them for later for composting, or you could use hay. That's a really easy way to get green materials. Our manure source, or our high nitrogen, you can either use a fresh manure or some sort of seed. Even a spent brewer's grain would work. And so you want to make sure that you have, you want 60% high nitrogen, 20, yeah, 20, well, you can adjust it, 20% green, 20% high nitrogen, but those numbers can move throughout the season. If it's a little bit warmer outside during the summer, you want less nitrogen, and then more actually during the winter time, so it gets hotter faster.
Now that's all it is for ingredients. I mean, don't you have to be sure about the quality of the ingredients you're using? Like if you're using wood chips,
absolutely.
you can't make sure your pine wood chips don't smell like pine, because then you got essential oils that could be negative to your bacteria. You can't get a chip drop where they're using like herbicides or the hay or the straw that they have herbicides on that's gonna not degrade out and then gonna kill stuff if it's composted. I mean,
that's absolutely
you want to discuss like
absolutely true.
I mean, you can't have like literally crappy manure.
Yeah.
Wait, manure is crappy crap that is contaminated with, antibiotics that the animals pooped out, right? Or they got bad digestive systems and the poop smells like really bad.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. So, like you mentioned, there are certain wood chips that are good to use fresh. Most deciduous trees are totally fine to use fresh, with the exception of eucalyptus, tea tree, things that we associate with like wounds, right? If we're putting essential oils on ourselves to heal wounds, that means they're antimicrobial. That's things we do not want to put in our compost pile while they still have that smell. If it smells like eucalyptus, if it smells like pine, if it smells like tea tree, those things are not things you want to be putting into your compost pile. So finding woods that are non-carnivorous is usually your best bet. So like apple orchard, pear, walnut, even A lot of people actually, walnut, speaking of walnut, black walnut, a lot of people associate that too with having a lot of inhibiting factors like for growth. But actually black walnut, we've used it as a percentage in our compost piles and we've had good success. It doesn't have quite that same oil that pine does and eucalyptus does. When it comes to green materials, yeah, you can go out and you can go buy hay. You can go buy a bale of hay. Buy it organically. There is a ton of chemicals that they spray onto inorganic hay so that they can bale it sooner and sell it faster. And those agents are antimicrobial. It's fungicides. It's also pesticides to keep things from eating out of it. So if you're not buying organic hay to make your compost, you could run into issues. We've lost hundreds of yards of compost because we cut corners and we were like, well, it's a little bit cheaper. We're going to save a little bit of money and we're going to, make a little more profit on this compost. No, we ended up having to ditch it all into the woods and use it as mulch. So, you know what I mean? It's not something you want to cut corners on. Buy organic hay if you are going to be building compost with it. I mean, cutting grass out of your yard is a good thing. You pick weeds every time you go out into your garden. That's green material. Those stuff are good. That stuff is good. And if you're thermophilically composting, you don't have to worry about the seeds that are in those weeds. So that is a good thing. And then as you mentioned as well on horse manure or any manure that matter, making sure you find it from a source that's not using dewormers. Dewormers kill nematodes as well as worms in the soil. Also, heavily antibiotic animals are also going to have a hindrance, right? Those antibiotics pass through the digestive systems of those animals and make their way into the materials. Another big one is salt licks. A lot of people wouldn't even think about this, but if these animals have free access to a salt lick on that property, where's that salt going that they're not using? Right out the back end. One in one side, right out the other. Now you have a bunch of salty manure, and that's not something that you want in your compost.
So that's all the ingredients, not just a big diversity and clean ingredients.
That's it.
That's simple. It sounds simple.
It does sound simple.
So what about the next one, with number 2?
Water. How many times have we had people call us, I'm making compost, I'm getting diverse ingredients, I'm putting everything together exactly the way I'm supposed to. And we're like, is it dry? If it dries out, you can't compost without water. Life does not happen without water. And so most of the times, 90% of people fail their first few compost piles is because they're not watering it enough. Having clean water is important. There's things like city water that have chlorine, chloramine in them. But even if that's all you have, it's okay. We've still seen compost piles come through with that water. It's just making sure there's enough of it in that pile.
So I would say filter, if you have city water, filter your water, off gas it, put in a big tub, let it off gas. For chloramine, chloramine's a pain in the ass, I hate it.
You can use humic acid for chloramine.
Yeah, there you go.
So, if you really have that stubborn chloramine, you can use, you can just buy it at a store. Humic acid, put it in a drop or 2 per gallon. That'll tie it all up, make it better for your microorganisms.
And just make sure you're always watering. Water, especially in the beginning and throughout the composting process. If you're doing thermophilic compost, this thing is baking from the inside out. It can get up to 160 degrees on the inside, and it is literally burning off that water. It is cooking it out of the inside of the compost pile, and so you need to be replenishing that water supply. Again, like I said, most people fail their compost because they're not adding enough water to that system.
Think of it like a pet. You've got all these microorganisms. They're just like your dog. You have to at least check every day to see if their bowl is still full of water.
So let's discuss that actually and go a little bit further. So you got to water your compost pile, but how much water? I mean, I just blatantly water it every day, but it's raining and I'm watering the garden or the compost pile, or like I'm in Las Vegas in the desert. We're in Pahrump, and this is an arid climate, right? Well, you'll need to water more in an arid climate. So how can somebody tell how much water should be in their compost?
So the best way to do this, a lot of people want to use moisture meters and things like that. Right here. This is the most sophisticated moisture meter you have. You're super sensitive. Your hands are sensitive. Grab that compost, grab your materials. Even when you first put a pile together, it's not compost yet, but it's a bunch of materials. Dig into that pile, grab a small handful of it, squeeze it with your hand. If you see a few drops come out when you're first making compost, it still looks like a bunch of organic material. Squeeze it, you want to see drops coming out of that. You want to see it running through your fingers. That's how you know you have enough water in the beginning. Now, once you're 5, 6, 7, 8 days into that process, then what you do is when you pick that material up, it's going to be a lot more compost. It's going to be less recognizable as organic material. It's going to start looking more like compost. When you squeeze that, you don't want it running out. Maybe a drop, but really you want it to fill the crevices of your knuckles with moisture. You want to see it pushing out. And also, when you put it up next to your ear, it should sound like a sponge. You know that noise that you hear when you squeeze on a wet sponge? That's the sponge effect. That's exactly what you want to be seeing. Overwatering is an issue as well as underwatering. So I did stress the point of making sure there's enough water, but also once you get further into the composting process, too much water can be just as big of an issue as not enough water. So if your materials are breaking down and you're squeezing it and it's running out, like pouring out the bottom of your hand, even 5, 6, 7, 8 drops coming out, it's time to back off. It's definitely time to back off. Out here in the desert, the simple remedies for that kind of thing is make sure you have it out in the sun, let it dry out a little bit. You know, you can use the weather to your advantage in both directions. You know, if it's a little too wet, if you have a cover on it, make sure you're removing that cover, let the sun get on it, let it dry it down a little bit. And then again, if it's too dry, water it and make sure you're covering it with something. Use some kind of a material. Go to the thrift store and buy organic cotton sheets, something like that, some kind of breathable material. That brings up a good point, is do not cover your compost in plastic. Plastic will kill and smother and trap out oxygen on your compost pile.
Cool, so we went over materials and moisture, and what's the third one?
Maintenance.
Maintenance. This is the easy one, right?
We're gonna go right back to what Casey just talked about. You have to water the compost. That's the main maintenance point. You water it, you need to check it like it's a pet, at least every day. Go and feel it, touch it, smell it. If it's smelling anaerobic, you have to...
What is smelling anaerobic?
What is smelling anaerobic? It's disgusting. It's the smell of rotten eggs, it's the smell of vomit, it's anything that makes you go bleh. That's not what we want in our compost piles. But you know, if that does happen, the idea is to just bring that moisture level down. So it's really rare when we're using diverse inputs like we talked about to ever smell those smells. But really the maintenance is just making sure that you have water on your compost piles. That's the biggest thing. And then, you know, also checking it with a microscope from time to time. We like to check it when it comes down to ambient temperature, and then, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 times per year, and anytime any issues might come up.
I would also say too, maintenance also, if you're doing thermophilic composting, temperature is huge. You know, there's temperature and turn charts. 131 degrees Fahrenheit is composting temperature. And then you want to make sure that whenever you're composting, you don't go above, say, 165 degrees Fahrenheit. So checking your compost with a thermometer every day, twice a day, is a huge part while you're still in that thermophilic process, when you're still heating up that compost. I could go in and start spitting off all the numbers, but I don't know if that's something I should do or not.
Maybe it's better if we just post a time and temp turn chart on our Instagram page. And then just make it available, or we could make it available.
Yeah, I'll post a link to their Instagram, of course, and you can check their Instagram out.
So yeah, we'll put our recipe chart, and we'll put our...
And on your site? Is it on your site?
It isn't on our website yet, but it should be. But anyway, I'll put it up for you guys.
It will be.
I'll put it up for you guys, but I'll get it sooner onto Instagram and then onto our website.
Because yeah, when you're doing thermophilic composting, you want to make sure that compost pile is being maintained above 131 degrees for at least 15 days.
And what if it isn't?
So, you know, there's a little bit of leeway here and there. We have to do 15 days because that's California state guidelines. When you're doing at-home compost, it's not something you're going to sell. Really, 10 days is enough. And also making sure that you're turning it within those 10 days. Like we said, we'll post the temps and time charts and all that stuff so you can see an understanding of how long it's at a temperature when you need to then turn that compost pile to get new oxygen into that pile, and make sure you're transferring different parts of that pile into the hot core of it, which will bake off your seeds, it'll kill your pathogens, and yeah, just kind of, it primes all that material, it breaks down the wood chips so that they're more available to be eaten up by the bacteria and fungi.
Cool, so I think we're down to the last main element of composting, number 4, so what is that?
That is testing.
Testing, and this is where most people fail, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you can put a bunch of organic materials together, let them sit there. You know, every now and then there is that one person who's like, this is just a pile of sticks I've had sitting in my yard. And we grab it, we put it under the microscope, and we're like, this is better than the compost we made. Like, how did you do this? And she's like, literally, it's just been sitting in the corner of my garden. And I'm like, God. But, you know, there's other people out there that have spent, you know, days, weeks, months babying this thing, doing what they think is something that is going to benefit their compost pile. And we throw it under the microscope and we're like, sorry, there's not a lot going on in here right now. So testing is something that you can do. I don't know, you know, getting a microscope is huge. It lets you see what's actually happening in a compost pile. It lets you see the biology that's in there. Without it, it's kind of like raising cattle that you cannot see. If you can't see your cattle, there's no way of knowing how they're doing. So you have to have a way of checking in on them. Other testings that you can do is, you know, you can send off for lab reports. There's, you know, if you're not going to have a microscope yourself, there's plenty of places where you can send off and get biological sampling done. We do it. There's the whole Soil Food Web network has people out there who can check biology for you. There's also chemical testing. So looking for your NPK, HJJ, all the chemicals that are out there. And then also getting tests for like heavy metals and things like that as well. Salmonella testing is always a good thing to do, even if you're at home gardening, just because, you know, say you're using your chicken scraps or your chicken droppings and, you know, you're not composting it thoroughly. If you take that material and you're throwing it out into your garden, you're throwing it on your tomatoes and all that stuff, and there's salmonella in there, it could be an issue. So, yeah, there's a lot of different testing methodologies you can do that can help you get a better understanding of how you did, how your job was, like how well did you put those materials together.
I mean, the big thing is if you're trying to grow microorganisms, if you want to get those benefits when we're talking about soil structure, water retention, nutrient cycling, you know, and the increased immune system and flavor profile of the plants, we want to have all those microorganisms present. So if we're calling ourselves microbe farmers, if our crop is really the organisms in the soil and not the cash crop, that's how I like to think of it, we definitely want to have a microscope. We want to be able to look and see, like, these guys are invisible. We can't see them with our eyes. Sometimes fungi you can, but to be able to zoom in and really get a view of that life, like, it's important to be able to do that. That helps you gauge success, and it just helps you know that you're taking the right steps to, you know, be taking care of the life in the soil and not killing it.
Cool. So, I mean, I guess the question to you is, if you test and your soil sucks, can you make it better, or are you just like, oh, that batch is bad, let's start over?
I mean, yes and no. You know, there are things that you can do. There's, you know, you can try to feed your compost with a little bit of, like, honestly, like soluble nutrient, like fish hydrolysate, things like that you would put out into a normal garden. These are fungal foods that you can use to try to boost fungal life in your compost. But honestly, at the end of the day, if your compost doesn't turn out, what we do is we scrap it. We start over. Now your whole entire compost is a brown material. It's a diverse brown material because it's gone through the composting process. So when you make your new piles, use that as a percentage of the brown material that you're putting in as a, you know, it's just a huge diversity change for the next pile you're going to make. And data. That should have been number 5.
Number 5 is data.
Keep your data. If you don't keep your data, it's just like making a cake. Has anybody, or any recipe, has anybody put a dish together before and they just kind of wang it through a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and it comes out at the end and it's like the best food you've ever made? And you go like, oh.
And you didn't write down the recipe.
You didn't write down the recipe. The next time you go to make it, you're like, oh, this one kind of sucks. If you don't have that data, if you don't write down all the stuff that you're putting in your compost or putting in your food, then there's no way to repeat it if you do it really well. So data is definitely a huge thing. So writing down which wood chips you used, where you got them from, what grasses you used, what manures you used, where you got them from. It also helps you deduct back. Say you made a really good compost pile this time, And then the next time, oh, you got manure from Farmer Joe down the road because Farmer Larry didn't have the manure that you needed. Oh, okay, you did the exact same thing except for the manure changed, and now that pile isn't as good as the last one. Okay, we can go through a little bit of deduction here and say, well, maybe Farmer John's manure wasn't very good.
Wow. So what I'm going to say is this. I'm surprised that you guys didn't say that. I mean, for me, what I would say is that you should buy their compost to use as an inoculant, so that you could already start off with having the right microbes that you just need to farm and take care of so that it can diversify. I mean, these people are so modest. So would you agree with me or disagree with me on that? They're like, don't buy our stuff.
Well, it's true. I mean, the best compost is the compost you make at home. We're here to provide a service for people that need it, but we do actually prefer that other people do what we do because we really think it's that important. And yeah, so you can actually buy our compost and use it as an inoculum for your own compost or your farm. You can make compost teas and extracts with it, but you can also do it yourself. So.
That is a good point. You know, it's like if, you know, whether you buy our compost or not, having some kind of starter, it's just like sourdough, right? When you're making sourdough bread, it's nice to already have a starter. Otherwise, you're just going to be baking flour in an oven. You need some kind of starter to go in there to kind of kick everything off. And so, yeah, buying a compost like ours or having a compost, something else that's local to you, is really beneficial to add into your compost piles, so that it kind of gives it that little kick. It makes sure that everybody's already there and present, so that things start happening much, much, much faster. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So what I would say is, if you guys buy their compost, don't like buy compost from them and then load it up in your field, right? You want to use theirs as an inoculant, right?
Yes.
So we discussed like adding a little bit of theirs to your compost, so you have the biologics in there that you just need to foster, and hopefully you've listened and are using diversity of ingredients that are properly sourced, that aren't contaminated. You're properly putting the moisture in there. You're also then managing it and checking in on it, and then you're also, of course, testing it to make sure that you're going to stay on track. Now, aside from just using theirs as an inoculant for your compost, even better yet would be brewing it as a compost tea and spreading it out on your yard, so that way you don't have to become a composting expert. Like, I don't want to become a composting expert. I could just buy their stuff and then use their stuff, use small amounts of their compost, which is quite pricey, but it is worth it. And then make compost tea and then spread it out and spread all that biology that they've worked really hard to make, that I don't have to get it into my garden, so now my plants can benefit from their hard work. And what are any other ways that you could really spread the microbes out with your products besides just adding it to compost, top dressing, or brewing tea out of it?
I mean, honestly, for us, like you said, our compost is quite expensive because we put so much energy and time into it. But extracts is one of the most effective ways to use compost. You can take a 20-pound bag of compost, turn it into a liquid, and you can put that out over 4, 5, 6 acres, honestly. And when you're spreading biology, it's kind of like spreading seeds. When you seed a field, you don't try to put so many seeds out there that the field is covered. No, you put seeds out there and you let those seeds grow and then cover the field. And biology acts the same way. So with a compost like ours or another good compost, you can make an extract and you spray that out there. That's like planting seeds of biology in your field, and those seeds are going to grow and slowly start to make and fill your fields with beneficial biology.
It takes time, but really the key is repetitive use. So as we've been able to work with large-scale farmers, they've been our best teachers. Really, in the beginning, we used way too much compost for every project that we did. But as we've been working with the really big guys, the bottom line is very important to them. They keep a lot of data. They've been doing it for a very long time. So it's very clear what their price per acre is and how much money they're making, all this. And what they've showed us over and over again is that like repetitive use with a very light dosage is the absolute best way to go. So if you're thinking about these seeds taking hold and growing, you have to think some guys are going to catch hold in the beginning and start to change that soil structure. And as time goes on, that's going to make a good home for the other applications of microorganisms you're putting down. So it's more of a change of the way you work and your process than it is a one-time application. But really, you don't have to put a lot out there. It can be a microdose to your soil.
Yeah, so I like that. So it's getting really dark here. I don't know if you guys could even see us anymore. So what I'm going to say is that these people are amazing. So you definitely want to follow them online. If you have a big farm and you need consulting work, They'll help you do the consulting to get you dialed into where you need to be. And of course, they had to start their own compost company so that they'd have the best compost and inoculants to get you the success that I know you guys want. And of course, if you guys want to support their compost company, how can somebody do that?
So you can find us online, www.catalystbioamendments with an s.com, or follow us on Instagram at Catalyst Bioamendments.
Facebook is the same. I also have a platform it's on Facebook and Instagram. It's called @SoilMicrobeLibrary. That's where I share images of microorganisms. And if you need help identifying the microbes in your microscope, you can send me pictures, and we have a team of people that'll help you, kind of understand what's going on.
Wow, amazing. So I'll post all those links down below in the description so you guys could just instantly go to them and learn more about like the importance of diversity of microbes and getting those into your soil in the best ways possible, and learn how to basically take your compost to the next level. Hopefully this video has helped you guys to understand more about how to make high quality compost. So final question is, any last words of wisdom you'd like to share with my viewers today before we sign off?
Oh, it's repetition. You have to water that compost.
Diversity, diversity, diversity.
So watering and diversity, don't forget it. All right, so that's pretty much brings me to the end of this episode, and we're probably totally black on the screen, but it's all right, because it's all about what you're learning through listening. So if you guys enjoyed this episode with Catalyst Bioamendments, right, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up. More importantly, share this with other gardeners, other farmers that want to learn how to dial in their compost so that they can have the best compost and get the best results because of the microdiversity of microbes and creatures in this food soil web compost that hopefully you're now creating. Also, be sure to click that subscribe button right down below so you don't miss my new and upcoming episodes every 5 to 7 days. You know where I show up or we'll be learning on my YouTube channel. Make sure you click the little bell so you get notified as my new videos come out. And finally, be sure to check our past episodes. My past episodes are a wealth of knowledge. Over 1,700 episodes at this time on this channel dedicated to teach you guys how to take your gardening to the next level with people like these. So with that, my name is John Kohler with GrowingYourGreens.com. We'll see you next time. And until then, remember, keep on growing.